Welcome to Spirit Baby Radio. You are about to join a frequency that will open your mind, expand your heart, and activate your spirit. Thank you for joining Kelly Meehan, Spirit Baby Medium and Master Energy Therapist. Kelly believes in the power of the Spirit Baby. She speaks with babies in spirit before life, in the womb, and after life. She supports, teaches, and guides others to tune into the intuitive and mystical parts of life for greater wisdom. Join her in meeting your soul baby and build your connection and relationship with deep love and trust. Welcome to Spirit Baby Radio with your host, Spirit Baby Medium, Kelly.
Welcome to episode 135, April 1st, 2022, Psychic Communication, Owning Your Psychic Awareness into Parenthood. Are you open to your psychic self as natural and normal? What ways can you enhance your friendship with intuition? How can you support yourself with healthy psychic self-care? What ways can you develop your Spirit Baby communication practices? I have a special guest episode. It's Anne. Hello, Anne.
Hi, Kelly. Thanks for having me.
And I'm going to read. Anne O'Brien is a no-nonsense mystic intuitive teacher of practical intuition. Since 2004, she has supported thousands of private clients and has spoken and taught around the U.S. Beginning in 1999, she completed 10 years of psychic training along with studies in yoga, aikido, holistic health, and conscious relationships. She has many loyal, long-term clients and graduates of her intuitive training programs, and is the author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, A Woman's Guide to Conscious Love, Navigating the Play of Feminine and Masculine Energy in Your Relationships. Her second book, Everyone is Psychic, will be released this spring, and she lives in the Roaring Fork Valley of Western Colorado. And Anne has been on Spirit Baby Radio before, and I know Anne for many, many years from Topanga, California. And I don't remember which episode it was, but I'll have to share that we talked about your book before, A Woman's Guide to Conscious Love, Navigating the Play of Feminine and Masculine Energy in Your Relationships, which is so important for Spirit Baby communication if you're in relationship. And now her second book, I'm really excited to go deep and talk about this book coming out in the spring, Everyone is Psychic. Thank you for being here, Anne.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the intro.
Yeah, I skimmed the book because I got my own copy here, but I'm going to buy the cover is gorgeous. I'm just in love with the cover. Like, just alone, I'm like, oh. And this book to me is like, it feels so present with stories. This is what I really enjoyed about it, is the personal stories. I think that's me. I love seeing the experience. And then I'm like dipping into Anne's world of like her childhood a little bit, teenage years and older, and all intertwined with psychic experiences. And I love the normalizing of it in a sense, right? Whatever that is. Like, we try to normalize things. And how there's so many different activities in there, meditations and writing. And I'm like, God, I got to come back to it. So I kind of was able to skim through it in the time that I have this book. I'd love to hear, what does this mean? Everyone is psychic, and what was the inspiration for it?
Well, the inspiration was really my whole life. You know, I was a sensitive kid, as you read in the book, and teenager, and I didn't know I was psychic because back in that time, people weren't really talking about it. And if you did talk about it, you know, as a kid, whether it's like, I see a monster under the bed. Oh, no, you don't. That's just your imagination. Or, Mom, why are you angry? No, honey, I'm fine. You know, and those are psychic moments, right? And we discount them, and most of us grew up without those really being noted. And then we get into deeper things, like as a teenager trying to heal my boyfriends or trying to heal my dad, or growing up and just feeling so sensitive to the world and not knowing that I wasn't always making my decisions based on my own information. I didn't know that so many of the emotions I was feeling and thoughts I was having and things that I was processing were not even mine. And so I got into different types of spiritual studies and meditation starting at 18 until my mid-20s, when I found a psychic development program. And that led to 10 years of training, and that led to me starting my business and, you know, making that a focus of my life. And I've been doing this for so long, and now we're at a point in the world where oh my gosh, people are waking up. Certainly in the last 2 years, my business has grown because a lot of people now are going, oh my God, like what's going on? I need answers, and needing to figure out their own answers, and people getting more interested and learning how to find their inner voice and listening to their intuition. And it's, I think, way more normal now than it used to be. And so I was really excited, and I shared with you too, Kelly, my mother passed away fall of 2020, and you know, if any of you listening have had a parent pass or something like this happen, it kind of makes you go, well, what's my life about? Like, what's meaningful about my life, and what am I going to leave behind? And then I was like, ding ding, like this is what I've been doing all my life. And I've been teaching this stuff for over a decade, maybe closer to 15 years, and it just was like, wow, I have all these curriculums, it's time to put this in a book and give this to the world. So that's kind of how that went.
Oh, I love how you said that. Put it all in a book, give it to the world, because it is a very rich, deep book. Like I said, I was like, oh, there's so much. There's a lot of, you know, I'm sure for me, and there's a lot of reminders for me. I'm sure there, and new things too, but that's what I think is nice about it. It's like, it's not just, oh, I get it. Like I can ground into it. I could hear the personal story and then see the exercise. I was really enjoying reading about roses, like all these things with roses. Probably not saying it so clearly, but just maybe that's just what really called to me, is that visual connection and using that in the inner practice of life. And something just popped in my head that's come up, because when I'm working with my conception ladies especially, and they're struggling and they're like, I don't know this, you know, they're psychic, but they're so like, it's almost like there's an over intellectualization of the left brain. I'd love for you to talk about that. And I'm sure you see that a lot. It's like, I see how people are psychic and they don't recognize it. And I'm like, well, it's right there. And I tell them, like, it's not what you think it is, right? It's almost like it's this imagery, this feeling that comes through, but when we put energy into it and we, like, do something with it, then we get to see. But maybe, can you talk more about that? I hope that's not confusing.
No, not at all. I agree. I do see that a lot, where people are kind of discounting themselves with their mind, or the culture has taught them to value what's in their mind, and making, you know, logic is what's important and intuition gets pushed down. Plus, we just haven't practiced it. Even if we're in communities where people are open to it, we don't often practice it and get feedback, a lot of us. So that's part of why I started intuitive training programs, is because people come to my classes and they don't, sometimes they're saying, like, I'm nervous, I don't know if I can do this. But every time when I teach people to do a reading, to learn how to read energy for themselves or other people, whether it's let me read the energy in my love life, let me read the energy for my health, for my work situation, whatever, like, every single person I've ever taught can do it. And the rose is one of the symbols I use a lot. And I love that you brought that in, because if the listener right now would like to close his or her eyes and just imagine a rose, like, I'm pretty sure you can all do it, right? And then if I say, picture a rose that represents your best friend, and then what pops into your mind? Like, what does this rose look like? Is it a bud? Is it full bloom? What color is it? And then by becoming like a kid, you know, becoming like a kindergartner and going into a place of wonder and curiosity and getting out of that, you know, left brain, like, I've got to figure it out and it's got to make sense right away. And just being in this space of like, ooh, I wonder what that's about. Tell me more about that. Like, oh, it's yellow. What does yellow mean to me? Well, yellow makes me feel happy. Okay, well, then maybe your best friend is happy right now. So we use the rose, and this is only one entry point. There's a lot of ways to approach intuition, but it's a great way to get started and to practice and then get feedback and go, oh, yeah, that was accurate. And then you play a little more, and then you test it out on other people. And when people practice and they realize it's working, then they trust it, and then they do it more, and then they, you know, learn how to live more and more by it, and that helps their life go smoother.
Oh, I really like how you said that. That was really nice. It's like, yeah, living it as a natural thing. I joke around and I say I live a supernatural life every day, but it's true what you're saying and what I've seen, because I think that also me and you are in this a lot. We're like in it so much that we see how normal it is, and that it's like it's okay, and we have permission to be there, because, you know, like you do, like I do, I hear stories and I'm going, they just literally just told me a psychic experience and then it's discarded. But I'm sure cultural and upraising, and, you know, I do feel like something else you said is, yeah, bringing it to other people does change the dynamic of it. Like, I know when I started saying things to people that felt normal to me, and they were looking at me like, why do you know that? You shouldn't know that. Or that's interesting. Oh, okay. And it was like, okay.
Right.
And so I always feel like I call it the psychic awareness I call it the energy, the language of energy. So it's like a language that we have to be a part of. Otherwise, like, it just becomes nothing. I almost feel like it's like learning, sign language, or learning a foreign language that feels maybe challenging at first, but then there's a normalcy to it. Because I know someone who could speak French, German, English. I'm like, what? Like, they've learned to, like, be a part of that symbol, that connection, and that energy,
Sure.
So let's talk about symbolism even. I know this is a big one in a lot of, like you said, the rose, but receiving in that sense, like you said, that visual space, but even maybe the feeling space. I have some people that say, I don't see anything, Kelly, I just feel things. How do you talk about that? Can you talk about
Absolutely. That? Yeah, well, in the book, I have a section where I go over the different types of psychic abilities. And there are many. And so going from the crown of the head down to the belly, there's claircognizance or clear knowing at the top of the head. Then there's clairvoyance at the third eye, clear seeing. There's clairaudience, being able to hear at the fifth chakra or throat. And then at the belly, there's clairsentience, and that's clear of feeling. So clair is a French word. It means clear. And everyone has all of these senses, just like we all have all of our typical, physical five senses. However, we're all stronger in certain ones and less developed in others. And so, yeah, that makes sense. Somebody might have the feeling as the most tuned in thing. For me, it's hearing. For many people, it's visual. And I like to start teaching with visual symbolism, because that's also a place where it's less confused in terms of, is this me, is this not me? If you imagine, like, this is something I'm looking at out there and I'm in my head and it's on a movie screen or it's out there a few feet in front of me, it's easy to go, okay, I'm not that. Whereas if you feel it, and I'm just talking about as a teaching tool, it's sometimes really difficult to discern, is that her feeling, my feeling, his feeling? Like, where is this coming from?
Oh my gosh, right?
Yeah.
And that's the hard one, was what I noticed is a lot of people will say, but I get a lot of empaths, like a lot, and which makes sense. And a few of them were like, oh, I'm not very visual, but I do feel like, I said, you can access your feeling and create visual with it. And they're like, oh, what's that mean? And I said, because that's how a lot of how I felt like I began really stepping into this energy, is like my feeling was so strong and accurate. But I noticed I started to feel things, pull them in and pull them into imagery somehow. And now it's become like a normal, I know. I'm like, because I could feel it, but then I couldn't. Then I was like, I would feel it into this visual space, and now it's become a thing. Now I don't really notice it. Now it feels like, before it felt like it was challenging in the beginning, because I felt so much, and there was so much, and I was like, it was almost like I had blindfolds on, and I'm touching with my hands, but I can't quite make it out. And so what I realized was that, well, what if I put it into visual imagery? And I didn't even know what that meant. And then I started to do that more and more and more. And then I was like, okay, that makes sense. Now they feel a little bit more separate, but I don't know if that's my training wheels. But I like how you talk about, almost like the solar plexus, like the receiving. And this is the thing that a lot of people, you probably hear this a lot, is like, I'm taking on energy or feelings. And it's like, that's a tricky one to recognize. I even still struggle with that at times. Like my son hurt himself. And then all of a sudden, he hurt his chin really bad. And then all of a sudden, I'm in the car. I'm like, God, my chin is so itchy. And I'm like, oh, wait, my son just hurt his chin. like I felt it in my body. I felt it. And it was like, oh, but then I'm like, I knew. I was like, okay, that's not mine. And that's what would you tell someone? That's why I say it's like, it's not mine. Or how do we know that separation? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
To distinguish what's yours and not yours.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, one thing I teach people is, just as a rule of thumb, if you can't process it, it's not yours. Because what's yours, it makes sense for you. So it's like if you have a puzzle, the puzzle of your life, and that's your puzzle to do. And if there's a piece missing, you have the piece and you can find the space for it. Whereas if you have a piece of my puzzle, Kelly, you're just going to bang your head against the wall, because you will never have a place for that in your puzzle.
Wow. I love the way you said that. Yeah. Keep going.
Yeah. So, in terms of people listening, if you have emotions that, let's say you cry and you feel better, that was your emotion. Or you get mad and then you get it out and you feel better, that was your anger. But if you're just angry all the time and you don't know why, or you cry and you don't feel better, and it goes on and on and on. You know, sometimes we have deep grief because of a loss or something that's different. But if it's like it doesn't make sense to you and you can't seem to move the energy, you don't feel better after processing, that's a sign that it's not yours. And same thing with a problem. Like if something's circling in your mind, if it's your problem to solve, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be easy, but you will get somewhere when you process it. You'll feel like I'm solving this creative challenge versus, you know, I can't sleep at night because this is circling in my mind and I don't have the answer. It might be because that's not your puzzle piece, you know, and it needs to be given back to whomever it belongs to. And so in the book, I have a lot of exercises. As you mentioned, Kelly, I have meditations, and they're not just sit and relax and breathe meditations. They're very active, guided meditations. So you learn how to identify. I have a meditation exercise where people can learn how to identify if something that's bothering them is theirs or not theirs, what percentage is theirs, not theirs, what percentage is present time or not, and then how to clear it or how to work with it depending on what they find out. So that's just one example.
That's really, that's so helpful. I hear what you're saying about meditation. When you started talking about that, I started thinking, I'm sure this will be available with audio book, right?
I almost said that, so that's your telepathy. Yeah, I was like, I should mention that it would be an audio book. Yes.
There you go. I know. This is like, we have a psychic soup right here between both of us.
Telepathy is my strongest of all the abilities.
Okay.
I would be in psychic school and I would be told to see a rose. You know, the assignment was, or the exercise was, you're supposed to see this thing and tell the person in front of you what you see. And I was like, am I going to get in trouble because I'm hearing stuff? You know, and I would be like, I hear this and I hear, you know, because I've always been a writer. And so I've always just had, you know, and musicians. So words and sounds are how you relate. And sometimes my clients will tell me that's how I heal them, is not just through like the energy clearing that I do, but through even my words, like my articulation, which is something I place a lot of value in. But yeah, it's a little bit of a side note.
Which I would say it's your frequency. I would say your frequency. That makes sense. Like your frequency, what you're tuned and set at. It's like your signal, your words. I feel like I'm not stepping over you, but I feel like it's more than your words. You know what I mean? It's like your essence. And your words are the key. I love that. And so I really, something else you said, telepathy. You're like, shoot, I hear everybody. Everybody's thoughts. That could be really hard. It's like, whoa, what's happening? But also makes me think, like my feeler was always the very much like I feel like my well, not my antennas. I almost feel like my octopus tentacles go out feeling everything and then feeling sick all the time. Not going to lie. Most people know that about me. I've had a very sick life from infancy, childhood, adulthood. It's like, oh, boy. It's like physical manifester is really big for me. And this is probably why I love somatic psychology, is to try to get in my body, disperse the energy, move it. But there was something else you said. Now I'm going to have to come back to it. I was like, oh, when you were talking about the telepathy, well, maybe it'll just come back. But I listed some of the chapters here. There's so many amazing chapters, but some of them that really were calling to me. I wanted people to hear what these chapters look like. And I love the first one, Awakening to Who You Are. Yes! Sounds good. And I love demystifying intuition. I didn't get to crack into that one, but it's like that is such a big one, right?
Yes.
Because a lot of people with intuition, they're in fear, but they think it's intuition. Actually, speak about that. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that, because I feel like it gets fought with me at times, but not really. It's like, but I'm intuitive or I'm not intuitive. And I'm like, that's intuition. That's not. So what are you going to do with that? It's almost as though fear becomes intuition. Have you seen it? That's, you know?
Absolutely. Well, that's a tricky one, you know, whether it's fear or hope. Like, you keep seeing a picture of something you're afraid is going to happen, or you hear a voice telling you something you're afraid is going on, you know, or on the other hand, you keep picturing something you wish would happen or you think is going to happen or you're hoping for, and that's not intuition. And it can be tricky, you know, and that's why I come back to the tools that I know and the grounding and the techniques that I know, because sometimes, like, I'm human too. Like, you get sick, you know, I have fear, you know, I have my own desires and triggers and things. So when I get in that place, I have to go, okay, let me sit down and use my techniques that I know and ask if this is true. And sometimes I'll hear a voice, like I'll have a fear coming up, like, you should do this, you're responsible for this. And then the voice will say, no, you're doing the right thing. You know, you're not responsible. And so you can tell the intuition, and, you know, I'm, again, speaking to where I go, which is the audio, but you can use it for imagery or whatnot. A trustable, intuitive guidance that's trustable won't spam you. It won't harass you. And so whether it's your inner voice or a spirit guide, right, it's like talking to a wise friend. And if you imagine sitting down with a wise friend over coffee and you're telling her about your problems and she gives you advice, and even if it's something you don't want to hear, or even if it's something you do want to hear, you know, it feels gentle, right? It doesn't feel sensational. It doesn't go on and on and on and you know, hit you over the head with it. Versus your fears and hopes and dreams will do that, your fantasies, right? So if you're getting intuition that's like really sensational, just stop and ground yourself and then listen for that still small voice, or look for the picture of what is actually true. And wait for the one that feels like gentle and clear, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I want to repeat something you said. I'm like, quote here from Anne, I love this, intuition's not going to spam you. I love that.
Right.
It's not going to spam you. That's a good. If you write that quote, send it to me. I'd love to share it, because that, I feel like with our world, people get that.
Yeah.
They're like, oh yeah. That was a great. I love that explanation. I really do. That was really good.
Thank you.
Something I want to come back to. I have to tell you, Anne. Ever since you just talked about telepathy, my mind keeps freezing. Which is interesting observation. I'm like, what is that? So then I wanted to write some things down to come back to the telepathy. It's like your signal is like, I'm like, what? Telepathy is a big one I use a lot. Yeah. With helping communication with Spirit Baby. And I do want to jump into that in a minute. But I wanted to, actually, let me first just kind of, psychic self-care I wrote down. I'm like, that's such a good one. We could do a whole podcast on that. Energetic anatomy, energy healing, aura and the aura layers. And this is where we'll go into baby now, is connecting with spirits. And then I saw baby beings, psychic children. And I was like, oh, this is so good. Of course, I feel like you can write separate books on those. Maybe we'll push you for that. I'd love to see more books on those topics. And so coming back to telepathy, I do feel like baby beings do communicate a lot with telepathy. And, of course, a lot of people do have high telepathic communication but don't recognize it. But also, when you were talking before about, like, your clients versus you or other people, I have this thing that happens with colors. I don't normally see colors. I'm not a color psychic person, I call it. Like, I'll see colors, but it's not, like, my thing. But when I see someone I start seeing a lot of colors in their energy, I ask them, I go, you see colors, not me. And most of the time, most people confirm it like 100%. And I said, use that. Use that as a tool to connect, to feel, to do something with that, you know?
Sure, I love that.
But yeah, let's talk about baby being. Let's go just jump into there. I love how you give insight, advice, and working with that, you know, the whole entire book, and then you could, you know, integrate that part in. And so tell us your inspiration. I know we talked about your story before, but share it again. Share your little piece of your story with your daughter.
Sure. Yeah, I have a daughter. She's 9 now, and I went through a period of not wanting a child and married a man who didn't want a child, got divorced, decided I wanted a child, and then I was single, and I was living in this little apartment above a garage in Topanga Canyon. That's maybe right before I met Kelly. And I remember lying there in my bed one night just kind of quietly meditating, and I got this picture of meeting a man at a raw foods retreat in Arizona and meeting my partner, you know, and I was like, that's interesting. And prior to that, I had been guided to just, like, go through all my stuff, like get rid of clothes I wasn't wearing, go through my file cabinet, like, and I was like, why am I doing this? Like, and that was more of a clairsentient, like, clear feeling, like my body just did it. I felt like I needed to. I didn't know why. So then I was like, okay, I don't think my man is here. I'm ready to have a child. Like I was like so, I was really, really yearning to have this child. And so I packed up everything. I put it in storage and I ended up traveling around. I had an internship at a raw foods retreat and then I canceled. That wasn't it. But then I was in a town where I met a woman who was into raw foods, and she ran a restaurant, and she was telling me like there's this retreat in Southern Arizona end of July, this raw foods retreat. And I was like, ding, 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 ding. Oh my God, I have to go. And so by that point I had been traveling like 2.5 months, and I went down to that retreat, and there was my daughter's father finally on like the third day. We finally met after being at this retreat together, and we were at a table, maybe 10 other people at the table over lunch. And I remember hearing him talk to some people and thinking, this man's kind of familiar. And I wasn't really interested in him, but I remember finally we spoke, and I said, I'm going to New Mexico. Because at that point, I was like, if I don't meet my man at this retreat, I'm tired of traveling. I'm just going to go move to Santa Fe, because that's where I was drawn to move. So I was spending half the retreat on Craigslist, like looking for a place to live in Santa Fe. And then meanwhile, I speak with my daughter's father, and he's like, well, I'm going to New Mexico too. I'll call you. And so we exchange information, and fast forward, 6 months later, I'm living in Santa Fe, and then this friend of mine brings him to my birthday party. I hadn't heard from him. He never called me. And that was like their first date, right? And I was dating somebody. And so it was just like, oh, there's this guy. And then I didn't even recognize him. And then I hear him talking about this raw foods retreat. And then I said, oh, you're the guy who said he was going to call and you didn't call. And then he blushed.
Aww.
I wasn't trying to embarrass him. I just was like very straightforward. That just like the thought occurred and it came right out my mouth. And then, then I ended up breaking up, and then he was single, and a few months later, and then we started dating, and then we both realized like this daughter has been calling us, and we weren't each other's types, and we're not together now. We tried it for about 6 years, and we realized, no, we've always been better off as friends, but we did, get together and have this daughter, and, we were both really feeling like she set the whole thing up. So that was my story.
Aww. I love that.
How she came.
Love that.
Yeah, we got pregnant on the first try. I mean, it was like pretty darn clear.
Yeah, wow. I know that does happen. And then everything continues to move, and then she's growing, and then she has, I love this, this chapter on psychic children. You have energy. I just opened the book. I was like, oh, here it is. Energy awareness exercises for kids. And so let's talk about our children, especially now. I know there's a lot to say about where energy's going and how these spirit beings are now embodied. They're upon Earth now, and they have different missions and purposes, as we know. And some of us have to be in the mystery of that purpose, right? But there's kind of a theme of energy for children, right? You see that probably with other children, maybe even with your daughter, and yet keeping it intact, right? Keeping it not polluted, or what can you say about that?
You mean like keeping their energy awareness alive that they're born with?
Yeah. You said it perfectly. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yes. So, in my case, I've just been, and my daughter's father as well, because he's also intuitive. Like, we've just talked to her about this stuff her whole life. And of course, you want to talk in child appropriate ways and things like that. But like, we talk about our ancestors who are no longer in the body. Like, she'll bring them up at dinner time. Oh, look, grandma's up there. The other day she gave me some information. So my grandfather, my mother's father, I called him Papa, but she calls her dad Papa. So she calls this man up, because when I told her the story, when he thought somebody was out of line, he'd go up. He could be pretty controlling. So up was like, you're out of line. You're doing that wrong. And so she goes, Mama, I think up really cared for you. He just was strict because he wanted to keep you safe, and he didn't want to waste money. And I was like, whoa, okay.
Okay, you're like,
Yeah. Wow. But in the book, I have exercises that you can use with your children from early on, and even before my daughter was verbal. I would send her picture messages, and I would use my hands, just like when I'm giving an energy healing, and I would just lift up my hand and I would wave my fingers in the air and say, let's send sparkles to somebody. Like if somebody's not feeling well, or if somebody needs some help to have a safe journey somewhere, we'll send sparkles to our friend. And she could do that with me. And then the color is a great one. So like you say, Kelly, some people are very attuned to color, and kids often are. So I used to teach kids Aikido, and I would say to the children, like, how do you want to feel? Like, let's take a minute and breathe and ask, how do you want to feel during your class, or how do you want to feel today? And they would imagine, you know, what they want to feel. Do they want to feel confident? Do they want to feel relaxed? Do they want to feel peaceful? Do they want to feel happy? And then I'd say, whatever you want to feel, ask yourself what color that is. What color makes you feel that way? And then make a bubble around your body of that color. And we adults can do this too, but kids are really good at it, right? And then that changes how they experience the world. That changes how people treat them. That changes how people perceive them. And it's like the shirt you're wearing, you know. It's just a really simple act of imagination, which because kids are already very imaginative, it's easy. And I would teach a grounding technique where, as adults, I teach this too. We can use a tree trunk or a waterfall from our hips to the center of the earth just to help us anchor and feel present and grounded in our body, but also a way to release energy. So for children, I would say, let's make a connection from your hips to the center of the earth. And I'll say it can be a tree, it can be a waterfall, but it can be anything you want, right? And the kids would say, I made an ice cream cone and I made a rocket ship and like all these things that are kind of fun, right? But they worked. Like every time after I taught the kids and asked the kids to do this, they were having a great time, just being playful, but they calmed down. And so the grounding worked. And so we adults, we get so serious, but I think, you know, meeting kids where they're at, they'll just naturally learn and grow and stay attuned to their intuition, and we can learn from them by getting out of our way and relaxing and being more playful. And then all this stuff will happen more, all this intuitive awareness.
I know. I love that the book, I'm flipping through it now. It's Grounding by Bubble, Sunshine, Bedtime Intentions, Bedtime Meditation Colors, Bedtime Meditation I Love You, Send Sparkles, which I'm sure your daughter was the inspiration for that, right? Because I remember one time we were hanging out at Halloween or something, and you said something about sparkles, like she sees my sparkles. She was staring at me like like she couldn't stop. You know, she was like, I was like, what's going on? I like this. I like this Guess Who also. The Guess Who. It's like it's true. Children are very. They just tap right into imagery and visual and color and feeling, and you know, how important of a time we're in now that we don't make them serious, right? Make them into adults. I do feel like that happens with social media and even puberty. Puberty seems to me to be really early, I'm noticing, with a lot of young children, but their parents are very, I feel like they're very conscientious parents, and they're, you know, fighting the good fight. But I'm going, wow, what is this? Is this something more collective? Is it environmental? Is it that, you know, is it, I don't know. But I also, you know, keeping children into their, you know, playfulness and innocence and feels really, really important right now, more than ever. And I know with my sons, we do play the telepathic and the empath game, I'll call it. We do colors and messages and I actually have cards. I have the Zener deck, I think it's called. Are you familiar with that? It's an old I feel like it's back in mediumship psychic days. The Zener deck is it's like a circle, a star, wavy lines, and then you're supposed to, you know, see what card is which one. But here's the thing with the cards. Here's the tricky thing. I never recommend it. It's something I bought to experiment with. That if you feel like you're picking the cards and you're getting them all wrong, it doesn't mean you don't know what you're doing. You know, that's why I wouldn't recommend it. Because when I try to do telepathy with the cards, I do really poorly. When I feel, when I try to feel what the cards are, I actually get high accuracy. So I'm like, oh, that's so interesting. And I also have to have a clear mind. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I would say I would probably be terrible at that game because I don't care about that.
That's what I mean.
Right? And we're all psychic in the areas. We're psychic in the areas that we are interested in. So like a mechanic is psychic about cars, and a chef is psychic about food, and the mother is psychic about her children. So, you know, my teacher used to say people would test him, you know, and he was like older generation than me, obviously. Like I want to say he started in the 70s, right? I started in the 90s. So people would come to him and say, like, what's my uncle's address? You know, back when we had phone books.
Oh,
like, why would I use my energy tapping into that when I could look it up in the phone book, right?
Yeah, I don't like the testing thing. That doesn't work for me, but I'm sure you get a lot of that from people.
Rarely. I used to when I did.
Good. Yeah.
Like when I did holistic expos, when I did like a psychic fair where there were a lot of people that didn't know me, and they would come and do a reading by the minute, you know, like a 5 or 10 minute reading. Or I worked at one point on a psychic hotline, and same thing, they were paying by the minute. Those were harder people to read on average. Versus now, people who hire me, they usually come through referrals. Yes. They've seen my website. They've heard my podcasts or videos, or, you know, they have a vibe already, or they've read my books and they know what I'm about. They know I'm not about that. So,
I like that we had that conversation, because there are so many different things happening and ways to connect. And, you know, a lot of people, I feel like they lack a certain level, of course, confidence, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to, and being able to trust and even explore and experiment. There's even, I love this, I wrote this word down, this one of your chapters talks about spiritual sovereignty.
Oh, yeah.
What does that mean? Can you talk about that? What is it?
I like that chapter too. I remember my editor was like, what do you mean? So I had to rewrite it. So I'm glad you enjoyed it, because it felt very important for me as well. You know, I believe kind of going from the beginning, like awakening to who you are, like who we are, we each are a spirit in a body. Right? And our spiritual energy is what's meant for our bodies, and vice versa. And so when we have energy that's not ours in our body, it's like a short circuit, like it just doesn't jive. And people ask, well, maybe I shouldn't clear energy, or maybe I shouldn't, you know, do this healing on this relationship, or call my energy back from this person. Isn't that unloving? Or isn't that too much separation? And I don't believe that that's true. And certain cultures, I think, have that belief more than others, or people that grew up with more enmeshment, maybe in their family or their baseline of what's normal in relationships. But I believe, and this gets into my first book a little too, like I believe when we have our wholeness within, we include everything, and we can run 100% our own energy through our own body. That's where our bliss is. That's where we're going to feel the best and have the most to give. And relationships aren't healthy, and our life isn't healthy if we're doing it from codependence or enmeshment. And so anyway, that's kind of what I talked about in the spiritual sovereignty. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it just really reminds me of something I feel so important now in these times, is really coming from our own, really, I'm going to use the word frequency again, coming from our own signal, because everybody's set at different signals, and there's nothing like, oh, somebody's better than someone else because their signal is more tuned in. It's just, it's just, you know, it's just where you're at, right? It's just like, which again, we see a lot happening in our reality. We're like not even over questioning, but really questioning, like, wait a minute, but everybody's set at different tones, and they get to shift those. They get to change them over time. And so to me, spiritual sovereignty makes the most sense. I just love like that, how that rings. And again, it's almost like, to me, it's like authentic being. It's like we can only know, and even what you're talking about, upbringings and those different traumas, big and small traumas, and how they've really molded us to really be who we are now. But we get to work through that. We get to go, okay, you know, come back to the supernatural self in many different ways. And so I'd love to, we're coming up to the end, and I'd love to hear anything that you feel. This book, is it for like age 0 to 100? I almost feel like it is.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you can read, you can read it.
I love that. Yes.
Kids shouldn't read. I'm like, I don't remember. I don't think there's anything that kids shouldn't read. But yeah, I mean, it's really a useful, practical book. I mean, I could envision some of this material being taught, you know, around dinner tables or in schools or, you know, because I think just being aware of energy is a basic life skill that most of us never got. So it's been an honor to be able to teach this and share this, because I feel like it's so much a part of what's happening that if it's not spoken, it's not dealt with. So it can make our lives so much better, or it can make our lives harder. If we learn how to work with it, I think our lives can be a lot better.
So can you share the full title of the book?
Yes. Yes. I'm actually, to be honest, I'm pulling it up because of the subtitle. I went through several.
Yeah, I want to hear the subtitle. I tried to cut and paste it,
Yeah.
but I couldn't. It wouldn't let me do it.
Yes, so it's Everyone is Psychic, How to Awaken Your Intuition to Improve Your Relationships, Enrich Your Life, and Read Others. And it's coming out this April. Yeah.
Yes. Coming out April. And please share, like, website, anything you want to, any ways that people can get in touch with you and learn about your intuitive school and your sessions.
Yes, it's AnnO'BrienLiving.com, ANNOBRIEN living.com, or I'm on social media at Ann O'Brien Living. And I have an intuitive training program. It just started in February, so if people want to message me through the site, they can find out and get on the list to learn when the next one is going to start. And meanwhile, I have private sessions. You can see on the website how the private sessions work and reach out if you want to book one of those. And, yeah, the book will be out this month.
Well, amazing, Ann. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Kelly. This has been fun.
Yeah, I've said, because there's so many things we could talk about and keep kind of weaving together. I want to, like, a scarf. You know what I'm saying? Weaving energy together. We'll make something. We're making something right now, it feels like. No, I really appreciate this book. I'm so excited for it to come out because, of course, I have to buy a hard copy because, again, I love books with paper, and having it on my shelf and having it as a resource is really exciting for me. Yeah, for my community.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for joining, and thank you for joining episode 135, Psychic Communication, Owning Your Psychic Awareness into Parenthood. If you like my podcast, please subscribe, leave reviews, and thank you for joining. Also, check out my journal. It's called Sacred Communication, a Spirit Baby Journal, and Spirit Baby Oracle Cards, Answers from Spirit Baby.
This is Spirit Baby Radio. Thank you for joining Kelly in the energy of awareness, love, healing, and soul communication. Please join the next episode at www.soulbabycommunication.com.